Okay, so have you ever heard someone say they're crashing after taking drugs? It's like more than just feeling tired, it's like your body's hitting some kind of reset
Yeah,
button.
like a hard reset.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into drug come downs, and honestly, the science behind it is actually kind of wild.
It really is, yeah. I mean, people think it's just a bad hangover, but it's actually like this whole chain reaction.
Totally.
Yeah,
So whether this is something you're dealing with personally, or maybe you're just trying to understand what someone else is going through, we're going to break it all down.
let's do it.
So starting with the basics, what exactly is a come down? Is it like the same thing for everyone?
Well, a come down or crashing,
Yeah.
basically it's your body trying to find its equilibrium again after, being high. But here's the thing. That process, it can feel really different depending on like what drug you're talking about.
So it's not one size fits all.
Not at all.
Makes sense when you think about it because, different drugs can make you feel totally different in the first place.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Like think about someone coming down from stimulants like a cocaine.
Okay.
You might get hit with this like intense fatigue, irritability, maybe even some serious depression.
Oh, wow.
But then you look at something like MDMA.
Okay.
You're more likely to see emotional distress, anxiety, trouble sleeping.
Really?
Yeah, it all comes down to how the drug, messes with your brain chemistry.
That's so interesting. It's like each drug kind of leaves its own like footprint on your brain
Yeah.
and creates the like really specific after effects.
Exactly. And
So the stuff we read talked about, like the actual physical reasons for why we have come downs, it's
Yeah.
more than just like the drug wearing off.
right. When you use a drug, you're basically forcing your brain to release all these feel-good chemicals,
Okay. Yeah.
especially dopamine and serotonin. It's like putting your brain on fast forward.
Wow.
But our bodies, they aren't really designed to maintain that level of like activity forever.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's got to be some kind of consequence, right? Our brains aren't supposed to be in overdrive all the time.
Right, exactly. So as the drug starts wearing off, your body's basically scrambling to clean up the mess,
Okay.
trying to get those dopamine and serotonin levels back to normal.
Mm.
And that process, that struggle,
Yeah.
is basically what we experience as a come down.
Huh. So it's not really your fault. It's like your brain working overtime to recover.
Exactly, yeah.
That's actually a really helpful way to think about it. And there are things that can make it even worse, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Like what should people be aware of?
Well, one major factor is dehydration.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Remember how we talked about dopamine and serotonin?
Yeah.
Well, they rely on this delicate balance of fluids and electrolytes in your brain.
Mm.
And when you're dehydrated, you're basically starving your brain of what it needs to, restore that balance.
So it makes it even harder for your brain to recover.
Exactly.
It's like running a marathon without any water. What about mixing drugs? How does that affect things?
Mixing is rough
Yeah.
because it's like you're just throwing another wrench in the system.
Yeah.
You're creating all these chemical reactions impacting different neurotransmitters.
Okay.
And it makes it really, really hard for your brain to,
Yeah.
regulate everything and get back to baseline.
Oh, wow.
It's like juggling.
Yeah.
The more balls you add in the air,
Yeah.
the harder it gets.
And the more likely you are to drop everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, like you're overloading the whole system.
Exactly. Yeah.
So no wonder things get out of whack. And it's not just what you mix, right? It's also how much you use.
Oh, absolutely. Dosage and frequency, they play a huge role.
Right.
And the research is pretty clear on this. The more you use and the more often, the worse that come down is going to be.
Yeah. Makes sense. So we've talked about what causes these come downs, but how can you actually tell if someone's going through one? Like, what are the signs?
Well, there are physical signs and then there are the psychological effects.
Okay, let's start with the physical ones because those seem like they'd be a little more obvious.
Sure. You'll often see fatigue. I mean, really bad headaches, nausea is pretty common. Some people even get muscle twitches.
That's rough. But I feel like you could almost brush those off as just feeling under the weather or something.
Yeah.
The psychological stuff seems way trickier. Like you could miss it pretty easily if you weren't really paying attention.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to be aware of it. We're talking about things like, a spike in anxiety.
Okay.
What people sometimes call hangxiety when it's related to drugs.
Right.
And then you've got like wild mood swings, difficulty concentrating. Some people get really withdrawn, don't want to be social at all.
Wow. It's easy to miss that stuff if you're not looking for it.
Yeah.
It really shows you how much this impacts like your mental well-being. It's not just a physical thing.
It's definitely not.
Okay, so let's talk about solutions. Like, what can you do to actually feel better? Or is it just a matter of, waiting it out?
Time definitely helps. but there are definitely things you can do to, like, help your body through the process.
Okay, give me the good stuff. What helps?
Well, first and foremost, remember how we were talking about dehydration?
Yeah.
You've got to stay hydrated. Seriously, water is your best friend during a come down.
Water is essential. Got it. What else helps your body kind of get back to normal?
Eating something nutritious can make a big difference, even if you're not feeling super hungry. Your body needs those nutrients to, repair itself.
Right.
And rest.
Mm.
I mean, just give yourself permission to rest and recover.
So it's kind of like, recovering from the flu. Hydrate, eat well, rest.
Exactly.
Makes sense. But what about the mental and emotional stuff? Like, is there anything that helps with that too?
For sure. Honestly, one of the most helpful things is to just talk to someone you trust.
Yeah.
Tell them how you're feeling.
Mm.
Because isolating yourself, it usually just makes those negative feelings a lot worse.
Totally. Sometimes just having someone listen makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if the mental stuff feels really overwhelming, try some relaxation techniques. Meditation can be really helpful. Or even just some deep breathing exercises.
Yeah.
Even light exercise. Like going for a walk can make a difference.
Those are really good tips. It's good to know there are things you can do,
Yeah.
both for your body and your mind. But what if someone is really struggling? Like, even with all of this, what if the come down just feels completely unmanageable?
That's a really good point. And I would say if the symptoms are bad or if they're sticking around for a long time,
Yeah.
don't hesitate to reach out to a doctor or a therapist.
Right.
Professional help can make a world of difference.
I think that's so important. There's no shame in asking for help,
None at all.
especially when you really need it.
Exactly. And, there's one more thing I want to emphasize, particularly when we're talking about come downs.
Yeah, what's that?
It's so tempting to want to, use more drugs to try to feel better. But it's dangerous,
Yeah.
It's such a slippery slope.
Yeah, it's that whole vicious cycle, right? Like, you use more to feel better, but then you just feel worse, so you use more.
Exactly. And it can spiral out of control so quickly.
It's one of the biggest risks with come downs, for sure.
Definitely. So if you're feeling that urge, please reach out for support instead.
Yeah,
Talk to somebody. There are people who care about you.
I love that. Support over self-medicating.
Absolutely.
Everyone, remember that. Okay, so we've covered so much ground here. We talked about the science behind come downs, how to deal with them.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you hope people take away from this whole conversation?
I think for me, it's really about understanding the bigger picture.
Okay.
When you get the science, when you understand why come downs happen and how to deal with them, puts you back in the driver's seat, You can make better choices for yourself.
Right.
And you're also more equipped to support people in your life who might be going through it.
Totally. And there's so much shame and secrecy around this stuff.
Absolutely.
I think just having these open conversations can make a huge difference.
100%.
So as we wrap up here, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about how come downs are connected to mental health.
Yeah.
So knowing that, how can we, as a society, how can we do a better job of supporting people who are struggling with both substance use and mental health challenges?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
It's about empathy, right?
Yeah.
Challenging the stigma that surrounds both of those things and making sure that people have access to support. Real compassionate support.
Couldn't agree more. That's a conversation we need to keep having.
Absolutely. On that note, we're going to leave you to ponder that very important question.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of drug come downs. Until next time, stay curious and take care of yourselves.